Thank you. This is the fullest public coming out, especially when the rain just started coming. So we're going to start off with karakia. Kia tau, mai te marama. Me te whai, whakau. Nene kaupapa. Hui e. So let's be grounded in clarity that are for this purpose. Bring together. So we've got board member Grant from Golden Bay. Apologies for lateness. So just a motion to accept the lateness Deputy Chair to continue as Chair. So asked by board member Hutt. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, so we'll step into public comment. And now we have quite a lot of extra than what we would usually allow. Those that may be new to this. This can speak for up to 5 minutes. It just sort of helps us keep track of things. That all meetings are recorded for public access. So we've got people calling in on the chair may make a presentation where the speaker is criticizing the speaker is being repetitious, disrespectful, or subject to legal proceeding. And just for the elected members can only ask questions, anything that you're presenting, but we can't get until the end of the meeting when it's raised. Okay, so the first person on our come to the middle bit. Yeah, if you want. You did well. Oh, wow.
Oh, yep. Good. I did. Well, actually show our faces on the and I guess I was looking at the current state of the world. And it's too obvious that arrangements need to be made to make cycling and And but haven't been involved, but learning about all the negative that's been come about this this idea, this project. I just feel like I have to at least have my say. And I have found it actually a bit disturbing. The negative response was forcing us to look at how we're currently doing things and how our behaviour is affecting our own health, the world's health, community's health. And here we are being given funding from above, if not for us, then for and here we are finding ourselves people. I feel met on the road talking about High Street up there. That in I would say a road in the first place would be moving or selling your car. And it's very wrong that a few people could still keep parking their car or even selling at the expense of the same generations to come. And learning about, I accidentally finding myself in the Our Town Motueka meeting and learning the negative response there and learning how much of an influence they could have. I've actually went onto the Our Town Motueka website and realised that I'm actually partly funding it, which I didn't like to find out. The part of High Street that we're talking about is wide enough for everyone to use it in a way safer way than it's actually happening. Very obvious thing to do if we can't get a cycle lane through is at least to be painting some yellow lines there along the sides and just have a space to go. And then obviously maybe allowing for some exceptions. I don't know how you do that with signs around school hours for Motueka South. Is the right response to all the negativity. Just imagine it should be thrown off the table. Netherlands, and yes, things look very different like that at all. For a long time, when cars became popular and more people could afford it, people were proudly congesting all the cities and towns with it. And until the country just decided enough is enough. I've been explained several times that New Zealanders are a lazy people and love their cars, but I honestly do not want to believe that we couldn't make a difference and do our bit for the generations of people who are hoping to enjoy this world in the years to come. Of course, this is not all about High Street. There's other places, lots of other places where I think that changes could be made quite simply and it doesn't have to be too expensive. But just looking at the bike path that's been given to us along the airport, looking at a day like today, I've taken a few pictures. I can't help but not taking it personally. The place is drowned. It's just, the engineer was sleeping, I think, when they did it. I have no idea, but it goes like this, and part of the path is absolutely invisible. So we're not using that. We're not using it anyway because Sammy would have to work too hard on the gravel. Needs to keep some energy, save energy for low motor. I just think bike paths should be made with the commuter cyclists in mind, not just the people that take up their bike on Saturday or a Sunday morning. And I definitely don't like to be told to just take the back roads or go on the Great Taste Trail. If I want to do that on a Sunday, I'm happy to. But I actually don't like to go out for bike rides. It's not even my hobby. I'm just kidding. So I'm just going places. So yeah, I mean, you wouldn't tell us driver to take a detour to the supermarket. Oh wow! Oh, that's pretty good actually. Oh.
Did you want to finish off?
Well, I'm not. I have no idea what's this gonna, what effect it will have. But I'm glad that at least get to have my say here, and I'm really grateful for Amy, who told me that even if the bike path is not going ahead, I will be asked to have little idea or to come up with little ideas what else we could do. So
Thanks, Marguerite.
Just to clarify, clearly this is your main mode of transport.
I do have a car. I use it when I need it. I was caught out. We're lucky the whole day. Not now. Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the board?
The website that you were looking on, was that you said Our Town Motueka, do you mean TDC?
No,
You said Our Town Motueka said that you were paying for the road.
no, not for the road. No, I looked onto I actually wanted to find out who is in this organization. And then I came onto this website and it said how, like the way how it's, well, what it's doing, who's involved, the hire a secretary, whatever. And then it said it's partly funded through a special grant. It gets, on behalf of Our Town Motueka, the TDC gets money for them by what I pay every week. Right.
Just clarify,
Yeah.
it's a business levy, so if you're a business, you pay that levy, resident.
I don't pay. Oh, lucky that. Yeah. Okay. Well,
It's association, not.
okay. Yeah, because it does look like there's a lot of influence. So,
Thanks for clarifying that.
sorry.
Thank you, Marguerite. Hi. So next on this is Kevin Corey. Hi.
Do we need to do it there or can we do it from the front?
It's easier for the camera. I know it's.
You're probably going to guess. I'll keep my head on, otherwise. That's okay. That's pretty good.
When you're ready, Kevin.
Okay. And it was. I'm talking today about the penguin carnage at Kaiteri. As a rat trapper, and we try and keep rats and mice and stoats and the like away from the traps. We can kill them, so we don't. However, if you did look, that was in the Community Bay Notice. And the article that happened at the end of May. 3 little penguins being killed by a dog attack at the known habitat for the native species. It's a successful breeding pair which have been monitored, and a young single adult. Female of this pair, the origin mostly seen in juvenile adult is thought to be an offspring of the breeding pair in 2021, just reaching breeding age. Set up a trust called the Penguin to be able to try and protect these guys. And as the trust coordinator, come to the beach and let their dogs run loose. Kill anything. Dogs are natural hunters. Soon after that article, I went to Kaka Point. Now, you know Kaka Point. If ever you go there, it takes about half an hour to get that sort of feel of the place, and it's very special. Well, I caught 2 rats that day. When I came to my car, hang on, 2 rats, and we lost 3 penguins. I mean, like, you don't even have to do the maths to work it out. So I was aghast at that. And this is the part that really got us. When Linda was doing, so that picture shows the 3 animals, right? Now we have a bespoke vet who can definitively define how the animal died. And those got from a dog attack. On the same day that Linda was doing her rounds, a couple came to the beach at Kaiteriterri and they were well dressed. They had their precious pooch with them. And right at the road sign, there's a sign that says, do not let your dog off, keep your dog on a leash. So they let it off. The dog went straight down into the bush. So the couple had nothing to do with the attack, by the by. It was just a matter of frustration for us that they let their dog off the lead right in front of a sign advising the beach as a penguin habitat and the exercise and excuse they use. So for all the trappers out there, we are fighting a losing battle. The law is in our favor, but we have to apprehend people, which we can't do. So we are going to take another tack. We would like to be on the side of the ability for dogs to be able to exercise. So the question is, the dog park. I was at a meeting where a good counsellor mentioned that the dog park is not dead in the water yet. So my question is, how do we progress this further? Is there a specific plan of attack that we do? How do we go about it without having to have a lot of stuff on the table that's not going to go anywhere? So Penguin Trust people and the trappers would like to be helpful. Let's get the dog park going so we can at least have some chance of helping these little guys survive, because they're pretty small. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Through you, Madam Chair. I guess the point that we need to clarify is what is the scope of the dog park? Because when we first tabled it, it became the Rolls Royces of dog parks, which was not doable. So I guess as a community board member and as a councillor, I'd like to ask you to clarify what the scope is that you believe we as a community could then embrace, because previously it came back as the Rolls Royce model, which we.
I hear you. So we will come back at another meeting and put a proposal through that's a VW or a Mini. Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Cheers. Any other questions, sorry?
Thank you. And with time to spare. Malcolm Curry.
Well, Malcolm actually put his apologies and we caught up with him meeting and he's lucky.
He doesn't need to come. John Benson.
Okay. Hello all. I'm here to speak about the cycleways. The community board members have received my written total objection by who and how the petition and was presented. So I'm going to try and explain to you the comprehensive cycleway system so needed. And I'll start by two of my friends already have at the total roundabout. Both the leg was seriously hurt. The other person was there was a serious. The rider got knocked off at the bottom of Tudor Street. You will remember last March, I should say. Elementary school. Now, all these mentioned could be being far more serious. Around Motueka, not really passing at speed, clear oncoming. Squeezing park cars, which is another one. And if no one, plenty of people around here, it's commonplace. actually forcing people to take evasive actions. And this happens. And I mean, applying brakes. Ignorance by car drivers. People in cars just thinking they do not have to obey for a bike. They give way signs, stop signs. This happens all the time. It's a danger. We have you as a cyclist and abusing you. It's happened to other people. And the last time I parked, turning a right-hand turn into jacking, for example, and middle of the road, waiting for traffic to clear, a black Ford beside me, the window goes down, and what the fuck are you doing? Not on the footpaths. That's where you fuck up. But that's the sort of abuse you get. And he drove off. Now, this is not. So, in riders feeling and unsafe, more around. You just don't know. And a lot of us stay off High Street because it is unsafe. Feel unsafe. Therefore, don't let them ride their bikes. And I know I've ridden their bikes to school and have near misses and don't ride to school anymore. This is actual fact. This is not just me. I can bring forward people who confirm this. We need direct line cycleways for safety and to encourage people to get back on bikes. Not feed them around the waterfront or whatever. We need, like overseas and other cities, direct line. People can commute, A to B, direct line to school, to shopping, whatever. I'd encourage board members here to read a paper from Professor Simon Kingham, and I can give you his address on the 24th of May 2022 from the Canterbury University. And I've got the email address here. And it's headed, "Don't believe the backlash. The benefits of New Zealand investing more in cycling will far outweigh the costs." And when you go through that, and he's done studies in this country, all the overseas studies, and the business about parking affecting businesses proves to be incorrect. The safety factor proven beyond doubt that people on cycleways are safer and on busy road. And some of the reasons for that case is on high street, unsafe in case the cyclist.
I'm sorry, the times.
I was appointed community board member getting on the bandwagon and forming a cycleway down High Street. Facts, i.e. loss of parking and unsafe and all of that. And I'm totally, no, I'm finished up. I'll take quick.
Feel free to. I do a lot of research, so I'd be interested to read that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman and members of the Community Board, in response to a recent conversation with a bank teller, I make the following submission to advise her concerns relating to Carter Beach, Golden Bay. Recently, many posts have been installed at the beach, causing obstruction to members of the public being able to manoeuvre their vehicles and boat trailers. No prior consultation was made with the local residents. Why? This lady is a ratepayer and is concerned that Come the busy holiday period, a long queue will form, reaching out onto the busy roadway, adjoining the beach, and cause a hazard for accidents. Please could the Tasman District Council resolve this problem? Number two, I also received another report on a child falling off the play equipment at Kaiteri Ferry Beach, adjoining the restaurant. This equipment is in unsafe condition, and I have confirmed it is the responsibility of the Kaiteri Domain Board. I have their contact details and am following this complaint up with them. I've already done it, and they were very apologetic and sympathetic and said that they would be springing into action to attend to the different faults that I outlined to them, which I was very thankful. Both the two children that were basically injured, they fell flat on their face, were under 18 months of age, and it was quite frightening for them and their mothers. So I was thankful I had a positive response from the persons responsible. And then in the press newspaper of Thursday, the 15th of June, almost a full page article has been printed on the serious problems arising from the Christchurch City water supply. This is causing pitting on the inside, which eventually caused tiny holes replaced at a cost of approximately in less than age. University of Canterbury confirmed chlorination is to blame. More than 2,000 cylinders have been for months. My water cylinder installed into a new pump in 2011 had pitting problems, placed in Motueka in 2008 of age. It's going to happen here. It is happening currently, and I just thought forewarned us for it. And see if we can avoid it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any, yes,
Is that the one with rubberized?
As far as I know, matting. Don't know if it's a rubber. I'm not sure. It's next door to the restaurant.
in the centre, but in the centre by the
Yeah.
the main playground. Yeah. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Kristen, oh, apologies, not sure. Jeffnick. Hi.
Thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to speak today. I would like to speak about the requirement for police involvement assist in cooperation with PTC enforcement. I had a look at the police sets out the for police and also acknowledges administered by other entities. Would be one of those roles. The Policing Act describes when it would be necessary and or what's the other word again? Advisable, not necessary, but advisable. I forgot the other one. To cooperate with other entities, and I think that it's a when it becomes necessary, usually it's theoretically that's the search warrant. On the search warrant, it's a requirement. Police needs to be there in company in the role of accompaniment, which the Law Commission of New Zealand describes as a supervision role in order to guarantee the lawful taking of evidence, for example. An additional role would be the assistance role that could become necessary or advice. I forgot the appropriate was the word. Could become necessary or appropriate in regards to the security measures implemented by the TDC itself, that they would not be sufficient enough to deal with a certain situational matter. And I had a look at the job description for TDC's enforcement staff and could see there's a professional overlap sought by the TDC and armed forces such as police or military. Viable option for people seeking new career options from the armed forces that would then be brought into the TDC. And I just would like to address possible risks and benefits those overlaps bring. As you trying to and the community that voted for you. My personal opinion that is naturally occurring chance conflict of interest arising when you are perspectives. For example, in the we're used to investigate or criminal framework and then conduct inspections in a more civil framework, and that I think there could be a potential value for policymakers to consider those possible or possibly occurring conflicts of interest in their guiding documents for the staff, so that they have a clear guidance of what is appropriate in which context. And on a positive note, the benefits, of course, of this professional overlap that's coming from Crown law, where there's a high ethical integrity required for performing work like securing evidence, that in our framework of communities to provide more education for the community, how their actions are perceived by probably for policy makers, guide the staff about the Local Government Act, which does not bind the government, and former military acts that are in relation to accountability, so that, for example, a perceived obstruction does not necessarily mean. I just believe there's a high these possible risks in order to between the community and employed staff of the body policy.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? No, appreciate that. Maybe we've got some staff useful. Ray Hellier.
Compliance officers are using search warrants and police. Guys, conflict resolution. Are being targeted by compliance officers. When the compliance officer by the property owner, but usually because the property owner is served with a search warrant. The exercising of the warrant requires the presence of from the police presence that I think the board should do. For the particular, police know the difference between civil and criminal. Are the police even skilled in civil? Do the police remain in a supervisory? There must be. The elements are 9(3) of the RMA, that is using land in a manner the district rule is. We all know that the council is a corporate entity and it's a contract. So when a compliance for property, it is a contract. The elements of the contract are parties to the contract, competent, it must be free and genuine consent. Providing all material information. Value exchange between terms and conditions. Agreement. There must be a wetting signature as recorded evidence of. So in this case, the owner was asked for access. Each time the property owner ignored the compliance officer. Or where the condition to after 3 attempts that the officer is void, ending the. So in this case, the exercise of the warrant was remained unresolved and of how they were being used. Thank you.
We have any questions from? Thanks, Ray. And our last speaker on Zoom. Hi, Donald. Are you-
I'm not sure that you're hearing me because I'm certainly not really hearing much of what's going on at your end.
Can you hear?
I get about 2 words out of about 10. So can you just say yes or no to whether you're hearing me? I think that was a yes if everybody's nodding. Okay. Shall I get going then on the assumption? If I mute out, would somebody raise their hand so that I can actually see and stop? So thank you, Chairman. My bicycles are my primary means of transport. And I've cycled the roads of Tasman and particularly Motueka for the last 23 years. Decisions on matters of policy and the implementation of that policy need to be made on information that is relevant, factual, and evidenced. I'm sorry to say that what I have seen from the Nelson Mail article, the petition that is on your agenda today, and the views expressed in your letter of the 28th of April to the Chief Executive indicates that the opposition that has been mounted to the high street cycleways does not meet the criteria of evidenced, factual, and in some cases relevant information. Let me explain. The preamble to the petition referred to safety, loss of off-street parking, congestion, narrowing, access to services, impact on businesses, future implications. Let's have a closer look at these issues. Safety. What safety issues are we talking about? The implication here is that it is less safe to have a cycleway than no cycleway. I don't believe there is any evidence to support that proposition. Loss of on-street parking. What are the consequences and the evidence of the consequences? There is only one business on that stretch of the high street without off-road or nearby parking. TDC surveys suggest that very few residents don't have adequate off-street parking. Is on-street parking more important than improving road safety for cyclists? How much on-road parking actually happens? Very little, according to the TDC surveys. TDC measures parking utilization at less than 10% overall. So what is the problem? Congestion? What congestion? Is it the congestion that already exists on the high street? Or is it being suggested that cycle lanes will increase congestion? If so, how? Narrowing. Whatever does this mean? A parked car is more likely to occupy the width of the carriageway than a cycle lane. Access for services? What services? Rubbish, recycling vehicles, emergency vehicles will have access arrangements. That's what's in the plan. So where is the problem? Impact on businesses? What impact? And what is the evidence? Future implications? Whatever does this mean? So just what were people signing the petition for? I don't think we can really know that. After a quick analysis of the names and addresses on the petition, I noticed that approximately 25 people from 20 addresses in the affected part of the high street had signed. I think there are about 200 properties in that area. The idea that cycleways on state highways are inappropriate is without foundation and evidence. It is just opinion. My very strong opinion is that I and all cyclists would be safer if there were cycle lanes. Surely that is self-evident. It would be sad indeed if this plan were to be derailed by unsupported assertions and opinion. I'm sorry to sound so negative, but I did feel very negative about what I saw in the press and what I saw in the petition preamble. But I do want to end on a positive note. I don't agree with everything in the plan. For example, the proposed modifications to the Parr Street High Street junction seem to me to create more problems than it solves. That junction works really well for both cyclists and motorists since the traffic lights were installed. Let's not fix what's not broken. Motueka has waited a very long time for on-road cycle lanes, particularly near our schools and on the main thoroughfares. We are far behind Nelson and Richmond, and even further behind many countries in providing for cyclists. It is so very welcome to see at last some progress. We should be getting behind it, not opposing it. I'll finish on the most important point that I can make today. If only people would understand that cyclists are legitimate users of the road network, then it would be taken for granted that providing safer roads for cyclists was important, just as it is important to provide safer roads for motorists. Cyclists have always used the high street and will continue to do so. Appropriate safety provisions for cyclists using that road should be taken as a need, not as a debatable option. Thank you very much.
Anyone, but I'm just going to ask if anyone from the board has any questions. No, so thank you, Don.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Maru, do you want to? Yeah.
What time?
Just, just gonna. Mm. Yeah, yeah. That's fine. Okay, so we've just got some declarations of interest from the board, so I'll declare an interest in the chair's report. When we get to the transport authority. And now we've got, oh, sorry.
It's fair enough to go sit on the board, but
Okay. We've got Emma. And we've got several presentations. The first is from Rob O'Grady. Oh, sorry. Where's that? Oh, sorry, I've just jumped over. So we'll just confirm the minutes. We had two sets of minutes from last meeting. One was our standard one and one was confidential. So can I have a motion to move that? Board member Hutt and a seconder. Who's one? Please. Okay, so we'll move on. Oh, and everyone's in favour. Yes. Sorry about that. We'll move on to the presentation, but we ask. Yeah. So Rob O'Grady, Amy Shattock and Dan Roberts, the project team for Transport Choices update, or just Rob's coming up. Are you? Are you all coming up? Yeah. Free seats for you.
Thanks, Tarina. Good afternoon, Rob. By way of introduction, I'm Rob O'Grady. I'm with the project delivery team, and on the internal point of accountability for delivering the project. We've got Dan Roberts, who's our project manager. He's from a company called BPM, and we've got Amy Shattock, who's leading our comms project. So today we want to give you an update of where we've got to. We had substantial feedback to the proposal for the cycleways on High Street, and Amy's also been visiting properties on Tudor Street. By way of summary, we've had 394 online submissions as of the 1st of June. 44 people were spoken to on High Street, 30 out in Tudor Street. Amy and Dan and I have spoken to 40 businesses in person. We've received emails and material dropped into the service centre library. And we received a petition which had 250 signatures as of 1st of June. And we received an update more recently with some more signatures. As someone raised, there was interesting to analyse where the signatures would come from. 34 signatures for people on High Street, 141 from people in Motueka but outside High Street, and a number from people who live outside Motueka as well. We also had an outside Motueka meeting where a lot of the business community attended and we heard their views. So just looking at it from a big picture, from a town of about 8,000 people, we've received well over 500 bits of feedback. One of the themes was that people didn't think that they'd been consulted. The funding application was put together on the back of the walking and cycling strategy, which is a document that went up for public consultation. So in that document, the position of the cycleways were identified. But when we went to talk to people, people felt like that they didn't know anything about it. And I guess it's the nature of consultation that often it's the people who've got time or special interest that do input. And better or for worse, we've now got to a period where we do have a lot of feedback, and I think that we have heard all views from the community. Picking up on some of the themes, a lot of people were really against the cycleways, and there are a lot of people who are strongly for them, as we've heard today. So most definitely both sides of the debate. One thing that seems to be a lot of, there's a range. Some people wrote very detailed, and we're digesting it as we're able. There was some, and I guess this is one of the issues, working in a fast-paced project where we're trying to put together 19 months, and that's in terms of the way the information spreading by Chinese whispers amongst the community before we'd had the chance to put forward what we're actually doing. But that's ended up okay. We've now heard from a lot of people, and we've had the opportunity to set the record straight, and where we've got to is we're going to do a reset and try and go forward with something that we can deliver. So we'll do from here. One of our strong drivers is that we need to do something that's achievable in the time frame. So now in June 23, and according to the funding agreement, we have to finish within a year. So momentum is really important. And the principle that we're adopting is let's do things that are broadly supported, that we can bring the community along with us. And in terms of where we sit speaking here, we're in the delivery team. So we're not the decision-making function of council. We receive our instructions from our governance people and managers, and all of the feedback was made available to our ward councillors and the managers, and their decision is that the cycle lanes will be deferred and not included as part of the Transport Choices project. Noting that the cycle lanes remain part of the walking and cycling strategy, which is scheduled for review in 2027. And picking up on themes from the consultation, we're now focusing on things that can be delivered with minimal loss of car parks, and some of the easier ones, which will produce benefits for cyclists, focusing on key crossing points, getting people across intersections more safely. We're working out where there's some gaps in paths and improvements we can make, where there's conflicts between walkers and cyclists, that we can make improvements, and working on known issues. One cycleway which we are hoping will remain, well, I am speaking for myself, but it's up to our decision makers to decide through the forums such as this, is that Peter Street, we're progressing with design for that, and the other ones which were fairly advanced in design across outside the recreation centre to link paths from one side to the other, and also outside park from school. There's a pedestrian crossing there. We want to put a raised crossing in, and also do some intersection improvement there. And something else that will progress, will go into plan, is the roundabout at the intersection of Minoy and Whakarewa Street, which is funded from the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, and got a separate set of drivers for it. And what we're doing is we've got a long list of alternative scopes that we can deliver. There's about 45 separate items that we've been working on and costing and prioritising, and we're hoping to present that to the community board for a workshop in approximately 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll coordinate that with Emma. We'd like to have approximately 3 hours to go through our list and get your views on what we take forward. And where we're at with it, what we're proposing is we
Thank you. So the three of us were in that same meeting and I heard the absolute discussion in terms of that delay, but like Councillor Walker, although I was aware that the decision would be strongly the view of the councillors, I did think it was going to full council for final sign off. Because prior to that, there was the Streets for People and Transport Options group that I thought was the governance group, but wasn't either for the final. But not taken away that where we've landed is absolutely the view that was at that meeting, but I did think there was a second step as well.
So what I can suggest is we're coming back to the community board for a workshop in 3 weeks. And if the community board wants to revisit it through the chair, that would be a decision perhaps for the chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Grady. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Board member Hughes.
I was just, when I heard you talking, there was 3 references to reporting back to the community board, and I'm glad there's been some clarifications here, because as I understood it, we have nothing to do with whether or not all that goes ahead. That is, I understood a job of the 14 councillors and the governance people, and I'm glad that you brought that up, that it isn't the community board that decide whether or not all this happens.
It's not a question of through the chair, it's for clarification. There's certainly the workshop started at community board level, but as you realise, it's got complicated. So generally ward councillors wouldn't vote on these things at community board. And with 2 potential conflicts of interest, the board doesn't have a quorum to be a decision making or to have a recommendation formally to council now. But the workshop will give you the board the opportunity to have some more input. But some clarity around the final sign off, whether it's the 3 ward councillors and governance or whether it's full council would be handy.
I think that whatever we do ultimately will need to go to the full council.
Clarification about 18 months ago, the community board did vote in favour of cycling and walking through the Motueka, which is through the street cycle path, and the other ones that are being looked at. Yeah. So it has been discussed and agreed by the previous community board.
Any further questions? Sorry, we can't take any questions from the public, sorry. Yes, you're more than welcome to feedback and through the community board or direct to your councillors, and that can be found on the TDC website. Did you guys want to add anything before you wrap your session? Any other questions? Thank you so much for doing all that mahi and getting out and consulting and stuff. That was a really important part for this community board. And yeah, appreciate that feedback, and I appreciate you guys looping us in for the workshop that you're going to propose later on. So thank you. Downer Alliance, Drew Hayes. We'll get that one with clear. But no one's spoken.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Text what? You go.
It's easy.
I'd rather go to happy hour. I might be. Your before, yeah.
We can head next month.
Oh. That's the tune out.
Oh, I had about 300 coming.
But we see happening over there. Right, are you good, Drew?
I am, thank you. Yeah, kia ora. I know most of you, but for the ones I don't, my name is Drew Hayes and I manage the Tasman Alliance, which is a collaborative relationship between Down in New Zealand and Brisbane District Council. Yeah, we're responsible for the maintenance of the road network boundary to boundary within zones 3 and 4, which runs from Richmond to Maraho, up to Tapuera, up to the lake, and then back to Richmond. So it's a fairly big area. Probably roll on to the next slide, thank you. Yeah, I guess I've covered that as well. Yeah, I guess we do boundary maintenance, but we find ourselves doing more and more for council as sort of council's fix it folk. Obviously being a collaborative relationship between the two, we are both sure. So yeah, we're pretty well utilized outside of maintenance as well. I think going forward, I'm going to be coming along quarterly, just so we can catch up with you guys, and I can hear any hot points and try and fix them or look into them for you. So I guess if we click on the link, I've just got a bit of a map here, just with the work that was completed in Motueka in the last, well, this financial year to date. Isn't going to load. So this is an insight into our database that we manage called RAM. It's the roading database, and it houses this particular filters all the work we've completed in Motueka. And if you actually zoom in on some of the areas, and it's just for the Motueka ward. So if you go zoom in on, say, Motueka Key, on the right there, if you click on that single dot, that'll show with the single one, sorry, just below it or above it. It'll show a sign that we put in because of obviously the speed limit change down there with the routes across the road. So all of the jobs and all the work we've completed in Motueka can be viewed like this. So if this is a cool tool for you guys, then yeah, if you want to look at anything, yell out. I guess if we go back to the PowerPoint and go to the next slide as well, thank you. Just a bit of a wrap up from that, so we don't have to go through one by one. We've installed 78 metres of culvert this financial year to date in Motueka. We've cleared 1,997 cubic metres of slip material. That's excluding major events, so that's just small events every now and then, which is quite a bit of slip material considering they average about a cubic metre to a slip. Reseals, we've resealed just under 80,000 square metres of Motueka's roads, which is obviously the best, or the rejuvenation of that chip seal, which is the best waterproofing mechanism we've got. Pothole repairs, Councillor Walker's favourite, 645 of them in the Motueka region, which is actually down on last year so far, which is good. Stabilisation repairs, so that's heavy pavement maintenance in that middle photo up there. That's the emulsion stabilisation mill that we operate. It injects emulsion and mixes cement into the wearing, into the pavement. So failures get, I guess, mixed up, strengthened, and then we compact it back down and seal over top. Maintenance metal, we've delivered 1,700 cubic metres of maintenance metal to the Motueka area's unsealed roads. And the grade is graded 370 kilometres of signs maintenance. The signsman, our signsman Andrew and our patrol team have tackled 579 signs, whether it's maintenance or renewals. And then our trusty mower with Greg operating it has mowed 1,153 kilometres of the district's road. Which is to the market, which cuts down on gases and whatnot that are emitted by diesel, which is really good. Started to diversify with PHEVs and full EVs. That's our inspection vehicle there that our inspector gets around in, full electric, which is pretty cool. And also recently, Downer donated to the Alliance about 2,000 cubic meters of concrete waste. Great, we've inherited the waste, but we took it out and we crushed it into an AP100 and AP65. So we're using that recycled material on the network now as well. Some of it in Motueka as well. Cool. Emergency works from the district. Obviously, we got hammered a few times this year, and one of the big ones for the Motueka area was the Tangatotra slip. We got a fair bit of gyp from the locals for leaving it so long. And I takeaway from my team was we didn't say the why, we didn't communicate the why very well. We had to let it dry out. The slip obviously occurred in August, well, July last year, and then also August in the main event. So we had to let winter pass and give the site some time to dry out so we could actually get up on top of it and bring it down. We estimated it was going to be about 2,000 to 3,000 cubic meters. And by the time we cut our track right around the top, put our drainage ditch in, started cutting down and the machine was throwing material off. And the face we were leaving was just crumbling away and falling. So we actually had to remove 15,000 cubic meters in total. So it was not a small job. You can see the top left photo there, you can make out the excavator and the scale of the flip. That's actually a 30-ton excavator loading a 25-ton dump truck. So not very, it's big gear, and it got made look to be looking very small. As well as a D6 dozer, you see the Motueka River there, that was actually parked on the bench we created to bring the slip down. That was pretty big work. Hot points, obviously, we talked last time I was here about Par Street. And as such, we brought forward the reseal and the pavement repairs before the reseal. We've also got the fault map there, which sort of demonstrated the change of use and the acceleration of those faults. And we haven't noticed any further deterioration. Well, it's slowing down, if you will, which is really good to see. That waterproofing layers really help. Just a couple of videos here. I don't know how they're going to show. They show it right on my computer, but if you double click the image, sorry. So maybe we'll skip that. It's basically the spray run and then the two chip trucks chipping the reseal. So it's quite cool. Wildman Road, obviously Wildman's another one of those roads that's sort of at the end of its serviceable life. And this is what we do as, custodians of the network. We sweep the roads until they start to fail. Then we get in and fix them before it becomes too expensive, and then reseal them to renew that pipe. We've noticed, obviously, Wildman's at that point. It is on the reseal list for next financial, so July onwards. So this next season we'll be doing the reseal there. And before we do that, we do all the pre-reseal repairs, all the shoulder work, all the heavy pavement. We've been in there already doing some of it. We've also done some work in the shoulders where the trucks are demolishing the shoulders. We copped a bit of flack recently as well because we put a temporary chip seal down to hold some of the areas, and some of the chip stripped off. It was in the highly shaded areas and high stress areas. We can see the top image there is where it's one of the areas where the chip stripped. We expected it, to be honest with you. It's in our risk register for that site. We were expecting chip to strip. It just wasn't ideal conditions when we did it. We did it outside of construction season. We had planned to fix the road, and then we got the May storm event, which meant our resources got diverted. So we threw a coat seal on it to hold it through to next summer without further deterioration. The stone has gone in places, but the binder's still there, which is the bit we need to waterproof the road. So yeah, in 8 months, the road will be covered by a reseal and all fixed up, and it should look good. Noise of reseal. I know that that's a popular topic in Motueka, and it continues to be a point of contention, and obviously comes through the elected officials to myself. Obviously, a steel at the end of its life is very polished and smooth, and it sort of means the tires don't slap against it too much when they're traveling over it. Where you renew that surface, and obviously to put that, the surface that we're renewing is not the chip, it's actually the binder. The old binder becomes brittle, so we need to put a new layer over it to waterproof that layer so water can't get through. And as part of that, you can't just have vehicles traveling on binder because it's very slippery. So that's why the chips are introduced. And with new chip seal, it also provides skid resistance, which means it's a coarser, it's coarser because not in size, but also because it hasn't been polished. So the slack of the tires is a lot more. So that's the reason you get a louder. It does bed down in time for it to get back to.
Are you happy?
And well, so in particular part of it looks lovely. Is with the existing, vehicles on there.
So the seal life will be. I can't speak. Come back to you. I just don't have all the assets. I can go and talk to the asset team and come back through Emma. Yeah. Sure. I don't think it'll be been asked for design detail, design life, as well as life before it needs renewal. If you've got that, because it's quite yeah. And I thought this one might be of interest to show you. And so this is the reseal map of what we so if you zoom in, you see we've got a site in Upper Moutere. We've got 1.3. If you just sorry. The Wildman that we just talked about on King Edward, and a few urban type Motueka there. Pre-reseal and so I can make it about the year. Perfect. So that's
Yes, Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Probably just approaching up. I'm mindful that we've really had incident/accident the surface on a road. You see, don't have too many of them. What's the message? So Wildman Road, my understanding is because of the roads. Perfect on the weather, and the weather is going to get worse before it gets better. How do we get that message across to keep our community safe?
So winter maintenance is an interesting one, and it's a hot topic every year. It's always a social media storm when we start gritting. In terms of resource to apply grit to the road, we do have ample. We have 3 grit trucks, so dedicated grit trucks, 2 large bins and 1 small urban bin. We also possess multiple roller spreaders that can go on the back of 6 wheelers when it gets really bad to apply grit. So there's no concern of mine that we don't have enough resource. What we potentially have is a difference in the level of service between a state highway and local roads. State highways obviously have 1 stretch of road that they have ice hotspots on, so they can treat them really well. And they also use a product called CMA, which is a de-icer. which stops the road freezing. Council has too many kilometres of road to afford CMA. It's just not practical. We've looked into it and it's too expensive. Distance is somewhere around driving on grit if you compared to what you is the honest answer, and council's social media comms. Cabin of a car can be 20 degrees. It's icy outside, and when realistically 14% over it is still not much. So it's idea. Honestly, it's driver behaviours that have to change in winter driving, and unfortunately, no amount of advertising campaigns seem to be able to change people's mindsets.
Member Hutt. During our recent email communication, you were talking about an amazing project that you guys work on called Share the Road.
Yes.
In particular, with the hot topic at the moment. I just think it's fabulous. I was hoping that you were going to bring some slides. Can you share with the others?
Sure thing. Yeah. So Downer recently undertook some training amongst all of our heavy plant operators called Share the Road. And it also went out to the public forum as well. So it was a three-pronged approach. So it was all the heavy plant operators, and if you imagine some of them that drive a truck for the last 40 years in peak physical condition, we threw them all on bikes around Richmond CBD area, and then we had trucks down a truck bumping past them, so that the operators could get a sense of what it's like to pass a cyclist with a truck with heavy plant. And this training it was a whole morning's training, so it was quite the thing for them. So that was the first prong about it, and it was well received by everyone. I think some people weren't too keen on it, but everybody put something away from it. It's really good. Another bit was, obviously, we identified that children don't really understand blind spots at all. So we did a lot of training at the Weet-Bix Triathlon in Nelson City in Tahuna, where we actually took one of our Alliance trucks. It was an Alliance branded truck, which was pretty cool to get that into Nelson City. And we had it set up with cones set all around it. We'd walk the kids around the truck, we'd count the cones, see how many were on each side, etc. And we had the majority of the cones placed in blind spots. Then we got them to jump up in the cab and tell us how many cones they could see. And they were absolutely blown away that, they couldn't get close to the truck without the operator seeing them. They just had no concept of it. So there was a lot of training of children that went on that day as well, which was cool. And then the third prong is just visual messaging, which is why we got into the email to start with, just VMS boards out, telling people it's a high cycling area and to be vigilant. So yeah, that's the it's also the road program that we've just done.
So was there any other questions from the board? Thank you, Drew.
So if you do need anything, feel free to email me.
Just looking back on the notes, it came with Rob O'Grady about the roundabout. We had a wee look at that area.
We did. Yes. So I've taken the comments from yourself and I followed the leads, if you will, myself, and also passed them on to council. And council's actually gone back to Motueka to get them to have a good look at the roundabout in terms of damaging tyres to trucks. There's also some other bits and pieces up the top end that you put us on around the reasons that they can turn in there now. And that's being looked at by council as well. But Motueka will come back to council on that one. And when I hear back from council, I'll let yourself know.
And the McDonald's as well.
Yes. So that is in their renewal program. Yes. I'll follow up on that one because I thought I'd sent an email about it. But it may be sitting in my outbox, not yet seen yet. There was a pavement repairs, correct?
Yeah.
On the state highway.
get a lot of complaints around here. But on that last corner, you know, the papers. Everybody wants that, isn't it? But, yeah, Drew.
Yeah, I remember writing the email, so I've got to have it. So sorry. Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Are you going to? Yeah. Oh, income.
Just inviting Kim Drummond and Carl. Yes.
As it sounds.
Good to you. Well done.
I call Kim Drummond Motueka. I'm the group manager for environmental assurance from Open District Council, and by myself in this lovely town. 2 days out of 3, Steve, we were here on Sunday, going up and down the Motueka Awa, having a look at all of the progress that's been made there. But just responding to the chair's request, it's just an opportunity really just to talk to the board today around how our compliance and enforcement systems combine together to deliver on the outcome of the title that I'm encumbered with, which is environmental assurance. Really, so it's just an opportunity to have a bit of a chat to you around how those the rules-based system sort of comes together, and that's then delivered through a team at the council to ensure that environmental assurance is achieved. And probably the best way for me to start is to just reiterate that councils are creatures of statute. So we're not a constitutional based institution. We are the local government establishes councils, and so that's how we come to be. So we're a creature of parliament, and obviously the role of councils to delivered at a local level. Responsibilities for a range of acts, the Act, the Building Act, the Act, and so on. So we become quite a diverse institution, and we're even more diverse because we're all of the functions that local government has together, organisation. If you contrast that, Canterbury has a number of territorial authorities. Have your Selwyns, have your Kaikotas, Maru, and they all perform territorial functions. Environment Canterbury does, formed by the different councils. Tasman and indeed in you, and also in Gisborne and in Auckland, we have a different. And being made there is to basically local government in a more one of the themes that's come out of that is the fact is a better way of going. It's not the council authority largely dependent on a rate paying base. About 5% of the revenue comes in through a rate paying base, and of course taxation brings in the other 90%. Revenue, they've got all the power. To consolidate local government. So what we see in the way of local government having voice and more able to, indeed in times of change, will be aware that the Resource Management Act after 55 years of operation, something in that order, was intended to be a design stage. Turning that into 3 different, 2 of which are in the final stages of being we will be carried through in the and the third area which focuses on climate change system. So what we're seeing there, you would know about the 3 waters, portable waters as it's branded by the government, to take a lot of the functions out, put them in a different entity, but the regulatory powers stay within the council structure. Being able to require these other different water entities. I guess that is setting the scene for a fact phase in the makeup of Aotearoa, and what we're seeing now is not what we're going to have in the future, but what we've got now. And utilise the powers and authority that we are given to its best possible terms. Government basically the regulatory agency, and then along comes the likes of the Solicitor General, who says, well, actually, it's better to have that function delegated to staff. So what you find is that the prosecution powers and all of the regulatory tools, in some occasions of state council, example where the prosecution capability, the last time I looked at it, was sat with the council. It said no, the best place for those capabilities. So most other councils across the country ability to carry out those regulatory. In the case of Tasman District Council, are able to be further delegated through the our case, the prosecute and to take those actions. So that's required to have that knowledge across the spectrum of how we exercise that prosecution power. And then beyond that, there's a bunch of other tools that come into play, and they could be by way of infringement notices, abatement notices, and under the Resource Management Act, they could be by way of notices to fix under that Building Act, and they are delegated further down the staff. So the job of the regulator is to put in place a system where all of those powers are accessed by people who are appropriately qualified, and it's to the right level. And the lesser impacts, they're going to be delegated further down the organisation, and the more substantial powers, the prosecution powers, are going to sit higher up in the organisation. So that's the world that we work within. And Councillor Maru, I think, sent you the link to what we've got as a council, which is our enforcement policy. So to the extent that we need a policy, that's something that we go to our council to have sanctioned. And the council can either do that as a full council or one of its committees. So in, I think, the year of 2021, I'm thinking, the environment, at that stage, the regulatory committee, which has now been rebranded the Environment and Regulatory Committee, approved council's enforcement policy. And what that sets out is a framework so that folk can see how the council expects the executive to then go about carrying out those functions by way of policy. Our policy will never override the actual legislative provisions themselves, which are always changing. So as the legislation and the regulations that support it change, then sometimes our policy gets a little bit stale, and we need to bring that back to life. So policy is something that's constantly evolving, and indeed some of the, I guess, the tactics and the insights that we gain from accessing the wider network will mean that in due course we will be bringing our policy, our enforcement policy, back to our council table for updating. But we have the policy in play that Councillor Murray sent you the link towards. So that is effectively the I guess the public-facing document that tries to wrap up what is quite a complex array of enforcement powers that we have. And as I said, it could be in the dog control space, and we heard today about some of the challenges that folk not abiding by the bylaws that go with dog control and the extent that Little Blue Penguins have suffered. We've got liquor licensing requirements to put in play. And so we see at Mapua, for instance, at the moment, there's a big community interaction as to where a particular liquor outlet should or should not be established. So that's part of our domain. We have food safety control. So at the moment, we have some challenges in a particular part of our district where we're actually having to take some prosecution or regard the way a particular premises is offering food to public, which is not supported. So we have to take action on that. We have our Building Act obligations, and they are right across the board in terms of it's quite specific. And you may know that the council in recent times has been taken to task for failing to implement the building controls around swimming pools to the letter of the law. And so we find these things out at great cost. Also, in the RMA space, we were at the receiving end of a case where the public encouraged us to intervene with the way an airport was being operated in Aroa. And what the Environment Court found was that there was actually no place for the council to be in that. And we actually had cost award against us for taking a concern that the public had through that process. So as we do that, we learn a lot about what is in play and what is not, and how to fine tune things. So yeah, I guess that's the broader picture that we're operating under. A range of acts, and it's not just in my team, for instance, those powers exist. Our infrastructure people have powers that people intervene with the supply of water, for instance. There are regulators elsewhere in the council, but if they wish to take a prosecution, then that has to then come back through my position to be sanctioned. And while we have a group which has mainly got the regulatory functions within it, we also run a system that spans the council to make sure that our regulatory knowledge and insights are shared with those colleagues who are probably less inclined to know what powers are available to them and how to use it. We then take the skills that we're learning internally and we go to national networks. So our compliance enforcement team are connected nationally to make sure that they're sitting alongside their Auckland colleagues, their Wellington colleagues, their Canterbury colleagues, and they are exchanging notes and insights about how to achieve outcomes, using not only regulatory tools, but non-regulatory approaches. Because ultimately, the purpose of regulation is to change people's behaviour. And we're fully aware that you do that sometimes by the use of regulatory powers and other times at the other end of the spectrum by way of incentives. So in many respects, much of what the council gets involved in is a regulatory style, but it's working in a different end of that regulatory spectrum. So all of that stuff is part of our culture and part of the way that we organise ourselves and make sure that we're up to speed with the latest play. So tonight, because what we've gathered is where your main interest is in our enforcement under the RMA, I've brought Carl with me. So Carl is a team leader of one of the limbs of our RMA enforcement team, most particularly around the natural resource side of things. So Carl leads a team of people who respond either to complaints that are handed to us that we are obliged to follow up on. We have levels of service around that. If someone makes a complaint, we need to look into it. But we've also got a proactive compliance monitoring function, which is typically wrapped around resource consent. So people who are issued resource consents, effectively that it's a privilege to use the resource in a certain way. It comes with a set of conditions. And so we have quite a monitoring program wrapped around making sure that people abide by the conditions. So it's quite a multidisciplinary function. It's council-wide. It involves different types of skill sets. And we're happy to talk to you about any of the questions that might arise from the next day.
Thanks, Kim.
I've got a question. It's Carl wanted to start.
Yeah, is it okay to take some questions now? Before?
Yeah, you might cover it. Like, were you going to cover it? All questions?
No.
Okay. So through the chair, I guess if we start, either Carl will come, but if we started through the authorising of certain staff in their powers, and then that whole process to where you may seek a warrant through the court and then police a request to accompany. That sort of work comes from. At what stage do police accompany warranted staff to execute a warrant beyond just accessing a property to find something out? So what are those steps from staff normally carry out their abilities and have some powers under the RMA to access property and inspect?
Yeah.
To then elevating to the issuing of the issuing of a search warrant and to be accompanied by police. That's that transition part that came up last time from memory.
Right. So through the chair, I'll perhaps just do some opening comments to that, and Carl can certainly fill in the blanks. So with each of the acts comes a set of powers, which we're obviously well aware of how far we can go. And for instance, our officers do not have the automatic power to enter a property, particularly under the Resource Management Act. So we might go to seek a search warrant to allow us, with the assistance of into a dwelling, to obtain evidence. That's the reason we might use a search warrant. The second approach is the fact that we have powers, and as I say, a number of staff across the council who do have powers, where they meet folk who are not appreciative of those powers and perhaps don't willingly allow people to enter their property. At that point, we've got a health and safety obligation. We de-escalate, and we might go back and seek the assistance of the police through a search warrant to ensure the safety of our staff as they go about carrying out their functions. So that's the broad level, and perhaps Carl can add a little bit more to that.
Through the chair. So enforcement officers in Tasman District Council are empowered under the Act. They're empowered through the Chief Executive, so they have the power to execute functions that are enshrined in the Resource Management Act. That also includes the power in inspection. So one of our roles is to inspect. So whether it be from public complaint, we have a statutory obligation to monitor and enforce, and that includes to respond to public complaints. So there's a whole raft of things that require us to be empowered, firstly, by our, in this case, Chief Executive, to execute those functions. Then within the Act itself, there are a subset of powers that the enforcement officer who is empowered can then undertake certain acts and duties. Power of entry for inspection, and I can give you guys the sections of the Act if you want to refer to them. So the Resource Management Act has a power of entry for inspection. So that allows a officer who is empowered to go into the property to inspect it. As Kim rightly highlighted, it does not give you the power to go into a dwelling house, but it gives us the right to go and inspect the property to ascertain compliance with a rule or a resource consent condition, or in responding to a complaint, which is part of that process. The situation comes is that if ordinarily there are two processes to follow on for Councillor Maru's question about the process of search warrant. So the ordinary power of inspection allows us to go in there. There's some duties and functions we have to go through, which is specified in that section of the Act in order to do that, and we can call on any assistance that we require in order to do that. However, if this is through law, if we suspect that there is an offence has been committed and the purpose we're going there for is to gather evidence, then we require a search warrant. That is a legislative requirement that's come out of the court. So in order for us to go onto a property, in order to gather evidence, we need a search warrant. If we want to go into a dwelling house, we need a search warrant because the Act says we can't do it otherwise. So that's the kind of the two drivers behind the search warrant process, the ordinary business of a search warrant. And so that is enshrined in the legislation. As Kim has rightly highlighted, the other thing is that while we have the power to go on and inspect, and that also allows us to call on anyone to assist, we, from a safety point of view, and also because we don't want to become, embroiled in an argument and force ourselves into the property, even though we have a power to enter. it is far better for us to engage the police to come and assist us, and that's what we'll generally do. So the purpose behind that is so to just recap, we'll go on to gather evidence, or we will use it in order to avoid a breach of the peace and to ensure safety. And so we will call on the police to do that. So under the search warrant, if we use a search warrant to go on and inspect, the Act says the constable has to accompany it. A constable has to either enforce the search warrant execution or be with us when we do it. So that's an Act requirement. I'm telling you that it's true. I can refer you to the legislation. Okay, sorry, I'll talk to the chair because that's the point. So that's the provisions of the Act. So I guess, did that answer your question?
Just
Yes.
one more, so who holds the delegation for the application for the search warrant? Is that the chief executive delegated through the group manager? Who holds the council current officer delegation to apply for the search warrant?
Any officer can apply for a search warrant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our practice might be to have it authorised.
So any authorised warranted officer can apply the courts for a search warrant?
Yeah, so the process is that the officer, whoever is seeking the search warrant has to, it's dictated under the Search and Surveillance Act. Yes. So the requirement is that yeah, you would know that. So that requires that there's an issuing officer who's defined in the Act, and that requires that the person who is seeking the application for a search warrant has to go through that process of applying for that and for the affidavit and processes dictated to Councillor Maru would know. If he's satisfied on the grounds in the application, they will issue the search warrant, and that person will execute the search warrant.
Do you refer to suspect an offence being committed? How would that come about? What indicates suspecting an offence has been committed?
It's kind of, there's several ways that it will happen. So what will happen is that if we were going on in for a power of inspection and we found an offence that has occurred, we can do certain things on the site during that because we went under the 332 power of inspection, and we can gather evidence and do stuff there. If we then subsequently left the property and then decided we needed to go back and do more, we would need to get a search warrant because we already know that we have identified an offence. Therefore, if we're going back for that purpose to gather evidence, we need to return. It would have to be under search warrant. We do not have the power to go back in there and gather more evidence. So that's the process that's required. If we, this is where we have to form that opinion. So if we had a matter where we had reasonably good grounds to believe that an offence was there and established, and we're going on for that purpose of just confirming that and gathering evidence, as opposed to just an inspection to confirm that may or may not be an offence. But we are going on there because we have reasonably good grounds to suspect an offence has been committed. And for that reason, we want to go on there to gather evidence. We should get a search warrant because that's what the Act requires.
Just because there's some community concern around some of the enforcement, and I understand that goes to the point of like if someone's living in a tent or a caravan, that those that can be taken away.
I can't really. It's a bit dangerous talking about specifics, or I mean, because I can talk in a general. I mean, that's the general concept of.
Yeah, just get an understanding of like if that's.
So normally in our ordinary day of business, we receive lots of public complaints. So someone complains that something's happened or there's something going on, and I'm not just talking about dwellings, all of that, but any activity, whether it be a discharge or a coastal activity or whatever. That's what someone who's using a resource or someone who's doing something. If they make an allegation that it's contrary to a rule, or that we think that there's been a breach of a rule, that we need to go on to inspect. That's generally the process. So we will go to a property. We will have can let the person know we're coming on. Could be someone. if we can enter and have that conversation with people on site, we will go on and we will confirm whether it is or isn't compliant, depending on what the activity is. At that point, we will then make a decision as to what's the approach after that, depending on whether there is an offence or not. If we find there's non-compliance, then we will obviously engage with that person and go through the process of resolving that. And there's a myriad of tools that we can use with the RMA to achieve compliance, because that's the ultimate objective, is to gain compliance.
And how much discretion would the officer have to be able to make that decision? If it was worth carrying through the different levels or looking at another approach?
So it's actually, it is enshrined in our policy as well as what is considered to be good practice. And the principles are fairly well set out around, as Kim has highlighted, all the regional councils work on a collective to ensure there is best practice in the compliance monitoring space. So, and if you have a look at our compliance policy, even the older ones, they talk about the spectrum approach to compliance and to gaining compliance. So it starts from education right up, and enforcement is the last school of that spectrum. So the council and its officers don't default straight to enforcement. We will take on a strategic approach to try and gain compliance. So it starts from education. We might engage with them and do a number of things to gain compliance. Only at a point in time where we are not achieving through those other strategies, compliance strategies, will we then engage in the enforcement.
Perhaps with the chair, there's a good articulation of that. If you look at how the Ministry for Primary Industries carry out their enforcement, they use what they call the BAID model. So they start at one end, it's voluntary. They're hoping people will comply through voluntary means. Then they move into an assisted approach, so it's a little bit more encouraged. Then they go to directed, so that's actually, there's probably more directed approach to it. And then enforcement comes as if you haven't achieved through your BAD approaches, then your enforcement is your tool. And that is an approach that they commit to. So they commit to that publicly. And it's one of the things that councils across the country are considering, whether that would be a more explicit way of explaining our strategies. There's a little bit of work going into that. But you can see the different enforcement agencies across the natural resource sector all have a commonality amongst them, but they tend to express themselves slightly differently. But what we're seeing, I think, is the whole compliance and enforcement in the natural sector becoming a profession in its own right. So councils were pretty much late to the party, because you had enforcement agencies, elsewhere, whether it's the police and so on. But now I think the recognition that more and more of the burden of achieving outcomes actually sits with council because of the national direction. The profession itself is starting to shape up as something that's quite specific to this nation. And so we're seeing a lot more professional development pathway to bringing people in, because you need multiple skills. And our days of actually getting, from one source, be it the police or the armed forces that were mentioned before, is pretty much gone, because you now need, a greater skill set, and perhaps those institutions are able to supply. And so it's become a much more nuanced business, the whole regulatory world.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? Councillor Madu.
So Kim, it was before your time, so 2020-21, when that policy was reviewed, there was a number of recommendations that council chose not to adopt, and that was in Dennis' time. Is there a planned review date for that policy?
Through the chair, it's not planned in terms of a chunk, but we have got well advanced the work that we would like to bring forward to the council for considering an updated policy. Yes.
Thank you.
Member Hughes.
Yeah, I wish. Listen, all right, I had pages that I can read. Firstly, I know your background. You can explain that to me. Quite impressive. Mr. Cheeseman, your background.
I have 30 years in the regulatory space, which quite a lot of that was in the police, and 20 years in the resource management area.
Okay, well, firstly, great explanations on where you're coming from and the powers that you have. That's wonderful that you have these powers for you to assist you.
Mhm.
But you haven't actually spoken about the subject matter. Okay, now, the subject matter that's affecting Motueka is the fact that Motueka has, for decades, and I've been part of that, a transient community. But we have our people in our 200 square meter mansions and that sort of thing. We also have another group of people. And as you said, 35 odd years ago, things there was a catalyst. There was a group of people living out in the Appleby domain. And they were nicknamed the Appleby Mainers, and they were not wanted. And so it looks like a new rule came in where it enabled the council to get rid of these people. That's where I think this PRMP come from. That's my opinion. I may be wrong, but it looks like that what was used. Since then, you have this rule, and basically, if you live in a tent, caravan, boat, whatever, for 8 weeks, it becomes a building. Is that correct? Well, it is. I already know because I've been doing this for 3 years or more. So it becomes a building. And as such, it's subject to the same instead you're building a house. And that can cost a lot of money. But unfortunately, the people of Motueka, so many of them, don't have that. They lived in buses and house trucks. How do I turn that damn thing on? That's
You.
So there, you have another group of people living in the Motueka area. And the rule that you're talking of, that's breach, that they're breaching, I mean, you spoke about it, but you didn't actually speak about the subject matter. The reasons why you need to go around and visit with police is because you're trying to see if someone's living in a caravan, because that breaches this law. Now, this law has the legislative base, and for 3 years, you can refuse to answer. Now, the TDC has refused to answer. Sorry if I've got this wrong. At my induction, I spoke with a gentleman, and I think it's you, but possibly wrong. At the induction, all of us were there. I brought this up again, and I mentioned about being a discrete piece of legislation. Discrete. You don't probably want to know, you won't want the public to know about this sort of thing. And I was once again put the question to that person, and they assured me they could be answered. So you're actually, in effect, enforcing legislation which you refuse to explain. Sorry, TDC, so I'm not, sorry. So I've been warned to not criticise. I am doing my utmost to that. So yeah, we have this. If you're living in a vehicle, it becomes a building, yet you can't explain it. So I've given up. You don't have to explain. But this goes against so many other rules. One of them is a little thing called the human rights. Okay, if something becomes a building, you're in your own legislation, TDC's own legislation. It says you can't remove a building, but that in fact is what you're doing. But the man living in that house truck that has to go, you're removing his building. There's so many things here. And you look, what is this use of the land? He's living in a truck. He's living in a truck. Crying out loud in Motueka. They've been doing it for centuries. People have been living. I mean, that's where you got caravans from in the UK. If you were rich enough, you had a house. If you were poor, your house was a caravan. And once you finished there, you moved on to the next homestead. I mean, it's wonderful that you guys can do this for you. You have the power to remove people. You have the power to remove people from our region. And yes, of course, you've got the power. You guys are smart cookies. You know exactly what you can and can't do and what people product that. But really, should you? Really? Is this? I mean, I understand your predecessor, Mr. Dennis King, stated to me in a meeting before a meeting that council can have no social conscience in enforcement matters. I mean, you're keeping up the tradition, great stuff. But look, getting police go around to see if someone's got a composting toilet or an oven in a caravan. We've got better things to do, right? Really have. Sorry, I'm going to stop.
Thank you. I guess if we just get a clarification on, is that correct, that you can determine that it is a building if there's someone's staying in a tent or a caravan or a car? That, let's just see what they understand.
Chair, a building is a building, so a building under the Building Act is a matter that our colleagues in the Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment determine. So they have a series of ongoing determinations, which in a Building Act context determines what a building is. So that's well established in it, and it's changing. So as the determination changes, we go with the tide. We don't define the tide, we go with the tide. And that is entirely a matter that's centrally determined. So the Building Act is not a tool that is used and manipulated locally or changed locally. It's what comes down on us, and that's what we work with. The other angle on this is, what is a dwelling? So the Resource Management Act gives another interpretation of what a dwelling is, which can sometimes it can be one but not the other. And that is a matter that has got strong influence through your planning documents, that as a council, they come down, they're confirmed, and then we're operating with the plans and the consenting requirements that go with it. You've got another piece in the middle called the Freedom Camping, which again is structured around a series of bylaws, which are in part nationally driven, but can be locally tweaked. So that might be, so all these situations fit into one of those categories or another, and they are very much specific on the circumstances. So I certainly wouldn't say there's a generalisation that someone living in a tent is a building. I don't know, and any of those three things would frame that. Whether it's a caravan's a caravan. When does a caravan become a building? When does a caravan become a dwelling? Well, it depends on the nature of the circumstances and the adaptations taken to it. But while it's a caravan on the back of a car being towed around, it's not a building and it's not a dwelling.
Okay, so it can change. Depending on.
Just depending on the determinations,
Me again. So I guess the key part is the interpretation of the bylaws. Who sets bylaws and the rules?
So bylaws typically through the chair or through the local government act. So the bylaws are matters that come down through council.
So that would be a role of council. So I guess what I'm trying to highlight is lower bylaws, dog bylaws, parking bylaws. This board can request delegations to review bylaws from Motueka. The rewrite of the TRMP coming up, this board will have an opportunity, and ultimately councillors sign those off. So the councillors, the representatives that here ultimately set the rules that we then have to enforce, and often question the relevance of some of them. But I just want to even it up as for board member Hughes is you've joined this circle of being part of the Tapping District Council. So how we affect change, we look forward to doing it. And thank you for speaking. But staff are employed to follow, operate within policy and enforce the rules that ultimately council sign off. So that's the responsibility us sitting around this table have to share on.
Thank you. That's
Because I have much documentation that says exactly, and the documentation is from enforcement staff, states categorically that once somebody lives in a tent, caravan, but it becomes a building. Now, you might have, the TDC might have altered that recently. I don't know. I'm just going on my documentation given to me the last 3 years. So I was evicted during COVID under this exactly way. Okay, so I do know this stuff. So it was a bit vague, your explanation there as to, I've got it in fact. I mean, I've even got a letter from your enforcement staff that just says once a truck is on a private property for more than 3 months, I got lost. But that could be, heaven forbid, perhaps someone is quoting the legislation.
Thank you.
So anyway, just perhaps through the chair. So I mean, all these terms, they need to be sort of carefully looked at. So legislation, role of Parliament. Regulation, role of the government, cabinet. Yeah, planning documents, role of council. Bylaws, role of council. So, and so when you have a determination, say from MB about their, under the Building Act, it's coming out of the legislation determined by a government department, but we've got no influence on that whatsoever. So it is what it is, and it changes. So they can change the legislation or they can change the interpretation of the legislation. So that arrives at our door, a little bow, and we, work with it. So regulation, again, it's something we've got national regulation that comes at us. We might be able to be involved as a consultative party. As it possibly can be. So we have we're constantly looking at the regulatory landscape and looking to influence it so it works for our community of interest. So that's an active role, but ultimately the determination of regulation sits with the government. It's when you then start to move into the planning environment that the Resource Management Act creates and the bylaw environment that the Local Government Act creates, that we've got more room to actually craft it the way that we want it. And all this legislation fits in this great big landscape that we've got to make sense of at all times. So it's never a one thing. You've got to look across the spectrum of what you're being caught in. Yeah.
If I may just be the chair, so can clarify, as it stands today, for longer than 8 weeks, does it become a building? Yes or no?
As a structure becomes a building.
Thank you.
And then, and if it's a building, if it's a dwelling, it's rules because it becomes part of the rule structure.
Yeah.
And the rule structure in the TRMP is such that in certain zones, you can only have one residential activity, one dwelling.
I'm just talking about the first in the caravan, now it comes.
So there's a time, there's a time thing and then things change over a period of time. It didn't start that way, but when you have had time to it, things change. And that's why I say these things are very case specific rather than a general, comment. Didn't start off a building, but it becomes one through time. Yeah.
In 8 weeks.
Under
legislation or under?
It's under the TRMP. So the TRMP
under our planning framework, which is something that's in the hands of the
local
to adjust. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, that's good to know. And just to wind back a little bit, when a legislation comes through that is unworkable, or the community may feel it's unworkable, is the council in a position where they would push back?
Well, very, very much so. I mean, politically, you've got the ability to point out unworkable legislation, and if you can actually attract the attention of government in the fact that it's prioritised to do something about it, that's how legislation ultimately gets changed. It's through the feedback of people saying what we've got is not fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. We want something different. But of course, it's the job of Parliament to run through its process, which means entering it into the House, going through the select committee process before it churns out the other end. So very much it can be changed, and very much, council are actively looking, across the unworkable parts and constantly sending signals back to central government that things need to be changed.
That's good to know.
So through the chair, Mr. Drummond mentioned just a few moments ago about often officials of council are submitting legislation. So we're asked to submit, and we put forward the views that we hold. The other thing that you might have seen as an example of this more recently is around what was previously called the Three Waters program. And there were a number of councils around New Zealand who were very vocal with their position on Three Waters, and they presented their case to Parliament, to government, and collective and individually actually. And that has, I presume, had some influence in what is now becoming the affordable water infrastructure. So the local government does have the opportunity to lobby and to influence, but as Kim's pointed out, the legislative framework is one that we are given, and then we need to operate within that.
And just to add to Steve's point through the chair, the local government represents nationally through its Local Government New Zealand entity, which is the political arm, Tai Tuarā, which is the executive arm, and also increasingly Te Uru Kahika, which is the regional unitary arm. So each of those professional entities have their own ability to go through to the government processes and influence and carry a unified local government view that is nationwide. So that is quite a powerful entity. So when that arrives on the doorstep of government, they do tend to listen. Yeah.
Yes,
So I'm going to finish now because it needs to state and finish now. We've established that a caravan becomes a building after 8 weeks. You can go on holiday for longer. If it becomes a building / structure, the last time I looked, building / structure has to be fixed to the ground. Now, they've had 3 years to come up with an answer, so no doubt we'll at some stage. But so you see where we're coming from here. These are temporary. Temporary for some people is 3 years, a visa. You know, the idea of temporary changes for everybody. And we need what is, as I can see, most of the time it's not necessarily the physical. Much modern technology out there with grey water systems and composting toilets. There are answers to all this. Gone are the days of the so-called dirty hippie. You know, yeah. We just need to be a bit more caring. But looking at where there is enforcement, but there isn't an explanation of how you can do it. So, I mean, as far as I can see, you guys, GDC are enforcing laws which they can't explain them on the face of it. Caravan's a caravan. Okay? It doesn't matter how long someone's living in it, it's a caravan. And as long as you're not doing anything awful, we need to have another look at it. Thank you. Hey, and I appreciate you guys.
To acknowledge Mr. Hughes and his other reasons in our room, just quietly for a meeting that started at 4 o'clock. So I hear what you're saying. I hear thing with that are making our people homeless, and we're putting them into a place of being far more marginalised than they should be. And for me, who has a very big social conscience around this, I hear the TRMP is the problem. But what I don't hear is how do we change that in a hurry and not wait for TE else in the Tasman Environment Plan. Because actually this is not, and I'm very passionate about it, and the homeless are, and I'll tell you, in your role, but for my role in this change. Thank you.
I could, if it stands through the chair, you know, that view that the Environment and Regulatory Committee by yourself last week.
But where does it go?
Well, if it's about the planning framework, then the plan's got to move. And so
that move is my question.
that's, yeah.
With
well,
speed,
yep.
because you know, snail is something that is not helping my community.
Yeah.
Snail doesn't make sense.
Just something we'll take away for discussion. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'm just consulting Councillor Maru, but something that the community board can actually put through as a request for the committee. So we'll come back to you. We'll have a discussion about that later and back. But I really appreciate you both showing up and talking about a sensitive subject. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, so we are going to stream quickly along because there is a booking here at 7 o'clock. Is your report next?
What you go,
Should we do the
7.1.
discretionary? Okay, so we'll move to discretionary fund applications. So motion to receive. Where is that? Motion to receive the discretionary fund applications. Yes, board member Hart, seconder. Someone? Board member Hughes, all in favour? Wait. Save that being submitted. Is that what we're doing? Yeah. Okay, so Isabel. I'm just trying to find it on my phone. Where is it? Here we go. Ah. Isabel. So Isabel is going to be from Keep Motueka Beautiful.
Okay. This is the
sorry, we'll just give this a
brochure, which is the subject of the funding application to produce and print 10,000 copies of a new edition of this brochure. First of all, the amount I applied for was $500, which I think at the time was the maximum, but I understand that you have now increased that maximum to $700. So if possible, I would like to change my application to $700 so that Keep Motueka Beautiful itself doesn't have to bear too much of the costs. This is the third edition. We've printed 10,000 each time. And the last edition, because of COVID, lasted us quite a long time, but 10,000 would normally probably should do a couple of years. They're distributed, number one, through the eyesight, but also motel owners and cafes and the council's offices. And just as an example of a comment received from, well, a couple of different motel owners, one saying, oh, this is absolutely the best. Another saying it's great when people have a few hours to spare and say, you know, what can we do? And they produce this and it keeps people occupied and shows them beauty spots of the town, and hopefully they'll come back and spend more time. So funding is 2,400 to print. The eyesight have 100 and asking community board now for 700 and will be paid by Keep Motueka Beautiful. Any questions?
I'm happy to move.
Yes, thank you. Shall we? Yeah, but should we put forward to 700? Okay. Yes, so we. Thanks, Board Member Hart. I don't see that. Thank you. It's about what we're going to do is do them all at the end, but I've noted down the 700. No, yeah. Thank you. Marie. Empowerment Trust.
It's like, yeah, maybe that would help.
Okay, so I'm here today because of some students at Motueka High School, essentially from Te Mana Kōwhiri. We've run a program called Mates and Dates for them. It's an ACC provided program which ACC have ditched. And long story short, and
they still really want what we deliver through that program, which we are easily able to do. And we don't have to make that happen. Ana Kōwhiri has a year, and there's just no padding on that at all. And that's the end of that. But she really, really wants us. She really sees the value that we have brought to those students. They are high. Which is really good. And so yeah, work to those.
Thank you. Yes.
How's for you? This group, are they allowed to?
There's a request if you want to put your request.
Please, because I think it's miscommunication that we
Didn't advertise.
You can apply for, and we've just decided 700 to another group. I'm just thinking to confirm and trust this one.
How much is your program?
So the wrong person to ask me COVID right now, so I can't answer, but I could within 24 hours.
Okay, no, that's fine. Strong.
That's something pretty much right. You. No, that'll be talked up by.
At volunteer hours, whatever.
Dollars.
For and the person that does for COVID. So I'm really sorry.
Even though I think it's wonderful. Sorry to achieve.
Great question.
Well, not just
Yes.
not just dollars. That's just something we don't want.
Absolutely.
We should have. It's like there for that.
In the original application?
It just says ×5 healthy relationship and consent.
From my memory, and I know adequately, the 5 that was applied for was going towards the. And that's
Rest of the money will come.
fundraiser would find it, or I would, because we don't say no.
Any questions?
Thank you very, very much. And I'm sorry. I'm passionate.
Everybody has looked at Elisa's Motueka District Toy Library.
The quotes. No, not in London.
So she's applying for. Oh, yeah, it says up to 500. About a
Motion.
dollar. Okay, sorry. All right, sorry. Shall I ask? Okay, so for the first one, beautiful, we're asking if everyone's in favour, and secondly, to 700 accept. So moved by sorry, and I'll move on to the next one. So application 500 or a request to increase it to
Passport 700. In our community and how that helps.
my question is, we don't know how much the actual program is.
So through the chair, but
Towards 560. One is approving a toy library for 409 containers. Okay, so if I have strong citizen by board member Hughes. Better.
Week or so ago, maybe.
About it not being advertised.
People putting on Facebook.
Say that you could apply. You could do this. Out.
So this is relevant again. That us application form online to
Councillor.
you know, to get a whole lot of details, including.
Yeah.
So we're putting the. I'd rather we talked about and key costs of it. Audit it like a lot of his grants. That's a walker in terms of, you know, empowerment trust right about the project, whether it was spent on or whatever, towards the cost of running that. Good courses to the. I just sort of think they'll it doesn't matter if it's wages or higher or not looking at you, Councillor. I'm just it was in regards to board member Armstrong's request for budgets on. I think I mean, it just needs to be a snapshot.
I see those points.
as we have done. Just asking.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you. Yeah, that was a very long. Through the. Yeah.
So Emma's.
Awesome. Okay. So motion to receive the report. Yep. Councillor Dowler, and the name Queen Victoria. No discussion.
Yeah.
Councillor Dow. Thank you. Okay, so ask you to resume chair now that we can report.
So page. We're gonna take this as read.
Yeah.
Responding to the skydiving. What choices you've had, code of conduct, board, on the surface in terms of sort of what they'd like to do for special projects. Basically says you've got some funds to do. With your museum, so if there's an interest to pursue that, as a first point of call, meet with and the other people. My suggestion,
They would like the rope.
my suggestion, if the board wants to pursue it, impacted parties, and then bring that back.
This came up because it's about it being used car park. So if we're happy for it to be used as a car park, there's no issue. We need to remove the car park.
And that's what somebody needs to have some of the conversations about.
I'm happy to do that.
Joining you.
Put it to the group of the yeah, ain't got a parking permit, I'll get to it. When we're controlling it. Check that we can do that.
Council?
Yeah.
Which is parking school. So if you're happy, and just have a and impacted parties, like nobody else parks.
Transparent, so yeah.
And then this cycle. Councillor Walker, family harm. I think I've sent you all an updated list of.
So I had a conversation today. For us to catch up so that in April, quarterly. Then we had a discussion obviously of people. And I don't know how this fits in with family harm, but it came. It's fair to say that those numbers are according to Scott's words, couches and we've ever had. The last one was actually done over a 3 year period, slightly higher, which caused a bit of grief. Purely because to do a report sooner. But yeah, there is. continue having those meetings. Others around. Incident, and we've got to relocate.
Anything else?
I'd like,
Okay, so if myself and Deputy Chair the catch up. So I Senior Sergeant once it's been through a consultation. We had an informal, but it was too early for the board. Excuse me, and received. So, Councillor Dowler. Gary. You're driving so well.
It's fine. We've got to get out.
Page 74 financial statement. The mover and a seconder. I've just got a comment and it's page 75. Yep. So what should be of the remuneration payments for 4 members last month or so. So there'll just be 4 board's budget rather than a chairperson. Oh, sorry, moved. Hughes. Against Gary. Mr. Strange is working on and it's looking to bring back some content. Yeah.
Next year.
In terms of what may replace the, but there'll be Motueka consultation.
It's just a design.
It's a preempted discussion. An update coming from Mr. About 8 weeks away. So if you haven't been down there, contract's done. They're forming the ramps and bits, and then the last the concrete of the existing work, but the police coming out. Just as an oh, that should have been done or should be getting done. That board member, oh, it's not the South Elm. Motueka in terms of that we've allocated you to.
yeah, that's who's doing the graphics and correlating.
Will be used. Not oversee, just the board contact.
I had
I don't know anything about this.
I missed the last meeting.
It's okay. Perfect. That's
Can
perfect.
we just have anyone give you all the thank them if we have sent.
That's been. That's why there's nobody, there's nothing allocated.
that all go, so
All board member Hughes needs to come back and say, projects are currently doing a couple of things. So if our town wanted to give us just tidy your conflict up with the year plus the our town Motueka coordinator. Tidy that up.
We'll send an email.
The last 6 projects, how quick and brief that is. Spend the money in there. Yep.
The one before about the cemetery. So to use the council's plan or this or on a resolution. You plan. Start.
I guess if there's an action list in there, review of the landscape at the cemetery, that should. The additional one and the one that originally. Yeah, but if it's an existing review and project, just the request was to have a. So if there's an action that I'm just. But I just visited last time.
Yes, that's
The notes for you. So any questions on Councillor Walker?
Another staff member be appointed.
I didn't know that.
Weekly update, mate.
Oh, so when's the update? I haven't read this week. I have no idea. Somebody is working on that. Mr. Strange, Tony Strange. Special projects. Down. It's carried.
Yeah. O tēnei wā, mana ki tia.
We're closed.
Another big meeting.